Everyone, ready for another deep dive. This time we're taking on a story that's been told and retold, but we're gonna try to go a little deeper with this one. We're talking Bonnie and Clyde.
Yeah, the classic, outlaw couple.
Right, but we're not just rehashing the same old stuff you've seen in the movies. We've got this really interesting Korean text. It's actually a pretty comprehensive look at their whole lives, their crimes, and how it all went down. And what's really fascinating is how this source puts their story in the context of what was happening in America at the time.
Great Depression. Yeah. That's a huge part of it, I think.
Totally. We got to think breadlines, dust storms, people losing everything.
Exactly. I mean, just imagine the despair, the feeling that the whole system had failed them.
Right. So it's not surprising that people started looking for heroes, or anti-heroes at least. Someone who was willing to fight back against the establishment, even if it meant breaking the law.
And that's where Bonnie and Clyde come in.
Yeah.
They became this symbol of rebellion for some people, even though they were criminals.
They robbed banks, they killed people, but for some, they were sticking it to the man.
Right, and the Korean text really emphasizes that point. It delves into Bonnie's background, for example. She wasn't just some gun-toting moll like she's often portrayed.
Oh yeah, I was really struck by that too when I was reading this.
She was actually a pretty bright young woman.
Yeah.
Loved poetry, had real dreams and aspirations.
And some of her poems are included in the source. You can really feel her longing for something more out of life.
Exactly. It's like she was destined for a life less ordinary, though I'm sure she never imagined it would turn out the way it did.
But even her poetry, there's this darkness there, this feeling of being trapped. And the source also includes excerpts from her diary.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it talks about her life in Dallas before she met Clyde. She was working as a waitress, feeling stuck. And get this, there's even an entry where she talks about how much she loved going to the movies. Pretty ironic considering how her own life would become this Hollywood spectacle.
It's almost tragic in a way. This dreamer, this poet, caught up in a world of crime.
But to really understand how that happened, I think we need to look at Clyde.
Clyde Burrow, right? His path to becoming a notorious outlaw is just as fascinating.
Yeah, he didn't start out as a killer.
He was in and out of trouble as a young man. Petty theft, joyriding, that kind of thing.
But then came Eastham Prison.
That was a turning point for him.
This Korean source doesn't shy away from the brutality of his experience.
No, not at all. It talks about the violence he witnessed, the assaults he suffered. It really analyzes how those experiences shaped him.
So you're saying prison broke him?
Well, it's more complicated than that. I think it fueled a rage inside him, a desire for revenge against the system that had brutalized him.
But his crimes weren't just about survival or money.
No, I think there was a deeper motivation. It was about lashing out at a world that he felt had wronged him.
That's pretty intense. So then into this volatile mix walks Bonnie Parker.
January 1930, according to the Korean text.
And bam, they're drawn to each other instantly.
Like moths to a flame.
It's a classic story, right? Bad boy meets good girl?
But was it really love that pulled Bonnie into Clyde's world?
Or was it something more?
The Korean text explores that question. It acknowledges the romance, the excitement of it all. But it also suggests that Bonnie might have been drawn to something deeper. A sense of purpose. Maybe even a chance to escape her own circumstances.
So it wasn't just a love story, but a shared yearning for something more.
Exactly. And together they formed a partnership that would have deadly consequences.
They went from small-time robberies to a full-blown crime spree.
The Barrow Gang became notorious.
And there was one event in particular that changed everything. August 1932, they killed a law enforcement officer.
That was a turning point.
Up until then, they'd enjoyed a certain level of public sympathy.
Some people saw them as Robin Hood figures, stealing from the rich. But killing a lawman that shifted everything?
Suddenly, they were cold-blooded killers.
And the public turned on them.
They were forced deeper into hiding.
Living a double life.
Constantly on the run.
The Korean text really captures the grit of their existence.
It wasn't glamorous like in the movies.
It was a constant struggle for survival.
Always looking over their shoulder.
And the source includes this really powerful account from Blanche Barrow.
Buck Barrow's wife, right?
Yeah, she joined the gang for a while, and her story gives you a real sense of what it was like.
The exhaustion, the fear, the constant tension.
It's a reminder that the legend of Bonnie and Clyde is ultimately a tragedy.
And that tragedy was amplified by one event in particular, the Joplin shootout.
Oh yeah, that was a turning point in terms of their public image.
Pure chaos.
On fire everywhere.
They barely escaped with their lives.
But they left something behind that would change everything.
Photographs.
The police found all these photos in their hideout apartment in Joplin.
Pictures of Bonnie and Clyde posing with their guns.
Clowning around.
Yeah. contact.
even kissing.
These pictures became a media sensation.
They cemented their image as outlaw celebrities.
Imagine that becoming famous for being a criminal.
And the Korean text makes a really interesting point about how this fame affected Bonnie.
How so?
It suggests that this sudden notoriety put a lot of pressure on her.
Maybe even trapped her further in this life she was trying to escape. It's like they created this whirlwind and it was spinning out of control.
But before we get to their final chapter, there's another turning point we need to discuss. The car accident that left Bonnie severely burned.
Oh man, that was horrific. The source really emphasizes how bad those burns were.
Third-degree burns on her leg. Imagine the pain.
And they were constantly on the move, always hiding.
It's amazing they were able to function at all.
It shows their desperation, I guess, that they kept going.
They were determined to stay one step ahead of the law no matter what.
It's hard to imagine, trying to live a normal life with injuries like that.
Yeah, constantly on the run, fearing capture. It really highlights how desperate they were at this point.
The Korean text even mentions how they had to rely on the kindness of strangers for help with Bonnie's burns. And there's this crazy story about them kidnapping a couple of local cops.
Kidnapping cops.
Yeah, just to get medical attention for Bonnie.
Wow, talk about adding insult to injury.
Right, but it also shows this weird contradiction in their story.
Yeah, they were ruthless criminals, but also capable of acts of compassion.
Twisted compassion, maybe. But it seems like their world was closing in on them.
After the Joplin shootout, they were public enemy number one.
Yeah, their resources were dwindling. They were running out of options.
The Korean text talks about an incident at the Red Crown Tourist Court.
What was that?
The gang was holed up there trying to lay low, but they weren't exactly keeping a low profile.
What do you mean?
Late night partying, loud music. And then Clyde decided to clean his Browning automatic rifle inside their cabin.
Oh, no.
And of course, he accidentally fired a shot.
That's not going to end well.
He alerted the neighbors, the police were called. The whole place was surrounded.
Another shootout.
Yep, another chaotic scene.
Did they escape?
Yeah, but not without casualties.
Oh, no.
Buck Barrow, Clyde's brother, was seriously wounded.
And Blanche.
She's with him, nearly blinded by flying glass during the shootout.
So they were forced to abandon them?
They had no choice.
Man, that must have been tough.
Both Buck and Blanche were eventually captured.
What happened to Buck?
He died from his wounds a few days later.
That's awful.
It was a devastating blow to the gang. And the Korean text suggests that Buck's death really fueled Clyde's rage.
He saw it as another betrayal by the system.
Exactly. It reinforced his desire for revenge.
So they were spiraling deeper into this cycle of violence.
Every loss just made them more desperate.
The source details a series of close calls, escalating violence, paranoia.
They were like cornered animals lashing out.
All the while still trying to stay ahead of the law.
They even had a close call in their own hometown of Dallas.
Dallas, what happened?
They tried to meet up with family, but they were ambushed by a posse,
Seriously?
led by Sheriff Smoot Schmid.
They were always one step ahead, though.
They were lucky, that's for sure. Both Bonnie and Clyde were wounded in that shootout, but they managed to escape.
I guess their luck couldn't last forever.
No, it was running out. Their resources were depleted, their options were limited, the law was closing in.
And then came the Eastham prison break.
That was a huge turning point.
Clyde's chance for revenge against the prison that had brutalized him years earlier.
He broke out several inmates, including his old friend, Raymond Hamilton.
It was a bold move.
The Korean text really emphasizes the personal significance of this event for Clyde.
It wasn't just a crime, it was a statement.
Right. It was his way of striking back at the system.
But it also backfired big time.
It made them public enemy number one.
The Texas authorities were humiliated.
They were determined to bring Bonnie and Clyde down no matter what.
And that's where Frank Hamer enters the picture,
The legendary Texas Ranger.
brought in to hunt them down.
Hamer was a formidable adversary, a skilled tracker, a man who embodied the spirit of the Old West.
He wasn't messing around.
He was determined to eliminate them.
This was no longer a game of cat and mouse.
It was a fight to the death.
So Hamer starts tracking their movements, studying their patterns.
He was meticulous in his planning. He realized that Bonnie and Clyde were sticking to a familiar route.
What do you mean?
They were exploiting a legal loophole that prevented law enforcement from crossing state lines.
So they were hopping back and forth across state borders.
Exactly. And their movements became predictable, especially their tendency to visit family.
Their weakness.
Hamer knew this would be their undoing. He was a patient hunter, waiting for the right moment to strike.
So he's got them figured out, he knows their routine, and he's just waiting for the right moment to pounce.
Yeah, Hamer was working with Henry Methvin's father,
Methvin, one of the guys Clyde busted out of Eastham.
That's the one. Apparently Methvin's dad was cooperating with the authorities.
Interesting. So he gave Hamer the intel he needed.
Exactly. He told Hamer that Bonnie and Clyde were planning to meet up with Methvin in Bienville Parish, Louisiana.
Ah, so Hamer saw this as his chance to finally take them
It
down.
was the perfect opportunity. He assembled a posse, 6 heavily armed lawmen.
This was serious business.
They set up an ambush along a rural road in Bienville Parish.
Waiting for Bonnie and Clyde to walk right into their trap.
They were armed to the teeth, Browning automatic rifles, shotguns, pistols.
They meant business.
There was no intention of taking them alive.
May 23rd, 1934, the day it all ended.
The Korean text describes the scene in detail. Clyde was driving a stolen Ford V8 with Bonnie in the passenger seat.
They were probably feeling pretty confident, thinking they were outsmarted the law again.
They had no idea what was coming.
Driving along that road, no clue that they were driving into an ambush.
It was over before they even knew what hit them.
And then
Gunfire erupted from the bushes.
a hail of bullets.
Over 130 rounds were fired in just a few seconds.
It's hard to even imagine.
The car was riddled with bullet holes.
Your Korean text doesn't hold back on the details.
Clyde was killed instantly, shot through the head.
Oh, wow.
Bonnie screamed as the bullets kept coming.
Just a brutal end.
Both their bodies were riddled with bullets. The Undertaker later said it was difficult to even embalm them because of the sheer number of wounds.
It's a chilling reminder of the violence that defined their lives and their deaths.
The Korean text doesn't glorify it. It presents their demise as a tragedy.
A waste of 2 young lives. The Barra Gang was no more. But their story continues to fascinate us all these years later. Were they victims of circumstance? Or were they cold-blooded killers?
It's not an easy question to answer. The Korean text, like the historical record, presents a nuanced view. Bonnie and Clyde were complex individuals. Their lives were a mix of romance, desperation, violence, and ultimately tragedy.
It's easy to get caught up in the romanticized version of their story.
Especially with those photographs that made them infamous. Those images helped shape their public persona.
The glamorous outlaws, almost like movie stars.
It's easy to forget they were living a life of fear and violence.
Always on the run, never truly free. It makes you wonder if things could have been different.
Right. If they'd been born in a different time, maybe they could have lived ordinary lives.
Maybe Bonnie would have become a famous poet. Or a teacher.
It's a question that lingers long after you finish reading about them.
It makes you think about the power of circumstance,
And the choices we make when we're faced with adversity.
but also how those choices can have unintended consequences, like ripples in a pond.
This Korean text has really given us a lot to think about.
Yeah, it's challenged our assumptions about Bonnie and Clyde.
It's shown us the complexities of their lives.
And it's helped us understand their place in American history in a new way.
It's a good reminder that history is never black and white.
There's always more to the story.
And even the most familiar stories can surprise us when we dig a little deeper.
And that's what the deep dive is all about, right?
Going beyond the surface. Exploring the nuances.
Discovering the hidden truths.
And in the case of Bonnie and Clyde, we've uncovered a story that's both tragic and compelling.
A reminder that even outlaws can have a human side, and that the past is never truly past.
It continues to shape us in ways we may not even realize.
So thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the lives and times of Bonnie and Clyde,
We hope you've enjoyed the journey.
and that you'll come back for more fascinating explorations of the past. Until next time, keep on learning, keep on questioning, and keep on diving deep.